Hi everyone, welcome to Sociology today. This is Mr. P. Having a crazy hair day, oh my goodness. But what I'm going to go over right now is sort of something you can do for today's lesson. Okay, so we're reading Rules of the Game by Amy Tan, and we're revisiting Flipgrid if you didn't have a chance to submit to Flipgrid. Right here, to get a 3 on the assignment, what you're going to have to do is answer all the questions that have a little yellow required star. So if it says your answer required, you have to do that to get a 3 on this assignment on this task. If you want to get a 4, what you're going to have to do is complete all the comprehension questions that I outlined in blue. So if it says answer required for 4, you'll have to answer these questions underneath. I would like everyone to go for the 4. I think this is something we'll cover mostly in class. We might review this tomorrow as well. And then finally, there's a pre-AP extension that is required for 4.5. So if you really are aiming for an A+ in this class, this is what you're going to have to do. And I'll go over all these really quickly. But basically, Rules of the Game by Amy Tan is a really beautiful short story. It's really well crafted. I love teaching it in sociology. It's so great. And generally speaking, the reason why is because it's about family. Like we've been covering family this week in sociology. And it does a brilliant job of talking about how race, age, socioeconomic status, your level of intellectual ability, or the language you speak at home impact the person that you'll become. And it also plays a really interesting running metaphor between what it's like to be a daughter and what it's like to be the daughter of immigrants and what it's like to play the game of chess. There's lots of different games going on here, folks. The game of chess is the one most centrally, perhaps the most straightforward connotation to the word. But there's also the game of being a young daughter. Daughters are raised differently than sons in lots of ways, and there's different rules that young girls have to follow than young boys, generally speaking. Secondly, there's the game of Waverly's parents aren't from the United States, they're from China, a totally different country. They speak a different language, and even though they speak English, they're most comfortable in Chinese. So there's also the game of how does Waverly be an American, because the white folks expect her to be an American, but the Chinese people expect her to be Chinese. So what is she to do? If you've ever seen the movie Selena, I think there's a really great quote. It says, being a Mexican American is hard. We have to prove to the Mexicans how Mexican we are, and we gotta prove to the Americans how American we are. We gotta be more Mexican than the Mexicans and more American than the Americans all at the same time. It's exhausting. And it's also a social game, right? Talking about cultural identity. Do you identify as Mexican or American or Chinese or Vietnamese or whatever it is, or Japanese, whatever it is for you? Know that this is a common game that immigrant communities are faced with. Do we speak our native language at home, or do we speak English? Do we watch telenovelas? Do we watch things from Japan? Or do we watch American TV to become more Americanized? It's another very interesting game that runs throughout this text. Okay? And so I want you to think about this story as a metaphor, because this is San Francisco, and you can see that it sort of looks like a bit of a chessboard. But also think about San Francisco in this context, that this is Chinatown. Now, Chinatown, they speak Chinese, right? All the signs are in Chinese, so you would think you were in China, right? But consider this. Everything else is America. Chinatown is even America. It's just a slice of China in the United States. So even though in the story, people are able to escape into their identity and their cultural identity here and feel very much at home, you have to keep in mind that this is completely surrounded by traditionally more English-speaking communities. And so that's something else that Waverly has to balance. Is there a different game inside Chinatown than there is out here in the outside world? Is it possible to be Chinese here and American out here? Or do you have to be both? It's really something that our protagonist struggles with. And, chess is a game that's very exacting. It's all about rules. It's all about winning. It's all about thinking multiple moves ahead. Much like our character, she has to think lots of moves ahead. She's playing a game against her mom. Not an actual chess game, it's a metaphor, right? She's playing a game against her mom for her position in society. She's also playing the game against Americans, people who are born in the United States. So she's playing lots of games, okay? And that's what we're really exploring in today's activity. So to go over the assignment more physically and more tangibly, What you're going to do is, I imagine that we're going to get to like right here in class today, just because it takes a long time to go over all this material. But I want you to open up two files. This is the Rules of the Book audio file, so a YouTube reader reading it. I couldn't find a Chinese woman reading it, unfortunately. It would have made the movie or the recording much better. So cultural identity matters here, I think. But there's also the PDF with the text. So the best way of going about this is probably opening Rules of the Game right here. And you can play this audio file as you're reading the story itself. You'll notice that on this left-hand column, Mr. P, the whole story is in here. Right, the story itself is actually quite long. It's actually 6 pages in length. And so it would be really, really ambitious to try to, if I literally just read the whole thing, that would literally take our whole class period, which would be no fun, right? So what I really aim to do in class today is to give you the overview of the main concepts, ideas, and frameworks for analyzing the story, and then letting you go to do these other things right here. Okay? And what you do is you use the information here to answer this. So which of the following social identities can we determine about the narrator? You'll notice there's a yellow star here. This is required to get a 3 or better on the activity. So how old is she? Well, we'll have to go through here and read and see if it says. I was 6 when my mother taught me the art of invisible strength. Boom. Bang. Got it. Done. I'll tell you right now, religious affiliation isn't mentioned, so you're not going to get that one. But she's a girl. We might not know socioeconomic status right here, but we'll come back through class, and after the story you'll know this. Obviously she's Chinese, and are there any other social identities I missed? Maybe there are. And then you'll see in blue that we have this more a level 4 question. It says, okay folks, you're more than just your cultural identities. You're more than just your ethnicity. You're more than just your group identity. You're also your unique personality, your soul, so to speak. Something that transcends culture. Of course, your cultural identity is hugely important, and we spend a bunch of time in sociology discussing that. But sociologically speaking, the individual is the most powerful unit, generally speaking, in society. So, what do you think about Waverly? Would you describe her as being a rebellious young girl or an agreeable person? Remember, these are 2 marks of personality we looked at. Disagreeableness, agreeableness. In this context, agreeable works just fine. Okay, then that brings us to the second box, and you can see these questions right here. Again, this is required for a 3, and then to get a 4, you'll answer this question here. I'll delete that. That comes up later. If Waverly's mom is Chinese, you can read the question, sort of figure it from this point. Then we did an inside-outside activity to start class today. So it's like sometimes our families appear something on the outside, but inside the house it's much different. So for example, on the outside, your family might appear very loving and calm, but on the inside, maybe your mom yells a lot. Or on the outside, maybe you guys go to church a lot, but on the inside, no one really reads the Bible, right? These are just examples of outside, inside. Sometimes our families try to appear differently than they actually are, whether they know it or not, right? It's really, really interesting. Waverly's family does the same thing, and that's what we're exploring here. Also for 4, consider what is the game that they're playing? We'll go over that in class. Okay, number 5. What do you think? Are rules for immigrants different than for people who were born in the United States? For example, let's say your family's from Japan, or Vietnam, or Mexico, or Honduras, or wherever, or Poland, as is the case with my grandparents. Did they have to live by different rules than people who were born in the United States? If so, why? Secondly, it's interesting because Waverly's mom is much, much, much more comfortable speaking Chinese, but she speaks English all the time, even though it doesn't sound perfect linguistically. But, it's very functional. So I wonder why she does that. Why do you think she speaks in English, even if she could probably speak Chinese? Or does she have to speak English as a requirement for immigrants? What do you think? Then we go through very much the same questions here, here, and here. Okay, I want to give you some guidance on this because, so, but. So the stem is Waverly has to follow rules in her family because, let me change this. No, you know what, I like in her family because we could extend it more generally to, but we'll do this. Waverly has to follow many rules in her family because, why does she have to follow these rules? Are the rules different for her because she's a girl? Because she's 6 or 7 years old in the story? Are the rules different for her because her parents are immigrants? Would the rules be different if she was an 18-year-old black boy in the 1700s? Would the rules be different for her if she was a white boy living in the United States right now to millionaire parents? Maybe, probably. Why does she have to follow these rules in her family? So what? What are the consequences of her having to follow these rules? Does she love them? Do they make her a better person? Does she struggle with them? Do they keep her confined in a way? And then Waverly has to follow her family's rule, but are the rules different for her than from her brothers? Remember, her brothers have to do more chores than she does. Are the rules different for her? But does she break these rules? What do you think? Then for the pre-AP extension, it's pretty lengthy, so hear me out. Throughout the story, the author uses a running metaphor in which she compares the game of chess to the game of Waverly's life. For example, there are specific rules that exist in both games. The mom has opinions on both things. So we're talking about the rules of, specifically, why do you think this story is titled Rules of the Game? What's the relationship, or what is the connection between the game of chess in Waverly's life and the fact that she is the daughter of Chinese immigrants? How are these games similar or different? Now, I included a direct quote here from the story that talks about San Francisco, and you can look at the outline, the grid of San Francisco. It looks very much like a chessboard. So you have this very physical connection between the city and the idea of chess. But what I also want you to consider is, what are 3 words here, and how do they connect to this idea? So maybe you could say something like, well, in the story Rules of the Game by Amy Tan, the main character, Waverly, has a great level of ability. She's able to play chess at a really high level. She's very gifted. She probably has a very high IQ. She might even be a genius. She probably is a genius. Now, what are certain rules she has to follow because she's so bright? Does she have to study more? Do her parents hold her to a higher standard? Questions like this. Okay, love you all. You belong here. You loved your learn. If you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, I'll talk to you soon, and I'll talk to you later. Okay, bye everyone.